Makoko is an informal settlement across the third Mainland Bridge located on the coast of mainland Lagos in Nigeria. A third of the community is built on stilts along the lagoon, and the rest is on land. Like much of Lagos, it is highly multicultural. Conversations on the floating slum are usually in a language which is a peculiar medley of Yoruba, French, and Egun, a local dialect. Makoko is sometimes referred to as the Venice of Africa, due to its waterways and vulnerable situation as a community on stilts. These situations tend to increase the lack of education, unemployment, and crime rates. Furthermore, this community not only has to deal with environmental and social issues, but also faces economic challenges related to the rapid growth of the city of Lagos. But having a physical barrier due to the city being originally located next to a lagoon with rivers and lakes, which limits the growth of the community to the east. Makoko was established in the 18th century as a small fishing village. It quickly sprawled into the informal, urban settlement it is today. Estimates suggest that the slum is populated by anything in between 85,000 to 400,000 people. But the exact number is unknown because the settlement is considered illegal. Most people in Makoko earn money through fishing, timber cutting, hedging sand from the lagoon, or salt making. Usually, while the men go out to fish, the women prepare their stands at the markets to sell that day's catch. Some women often use their canoes as shops where other people can buy household products, water, and food. Nonetheless, the polluted waters in Lagos Bay and nearby are increasingly devoid of fish, and the commerce of local supply is being overwhelmed by frozen fish, imported from Europe. By fishing and selling a day's catch, the people of Makoko make less than $2 per day. With this, most of the population is unable to afford basic necessities. The waters beneath and around Makoko are around 5 feet deep. This water meanders through the water settlement, like streets in between houses. These streets act as a road system, where you can find canoes carrying children to school and people to their places of work. The houses are built above the water, and they are supported by stilts buried in the waterbed. The majority of the houses are built from plank and bamboo, but there are several cement and brick buildings as well. More often than not, the houses are rented and they house between 6 to 10 people. There are no government schools for the children of Makoko. Many children have never attended school and can't read. A floating school was built in Makoko in 2013. It was barely used and then was destroyed by a 2016 storm. The community was unable to pay teachers or buy books and supplies. This perpetuates the inequality because without a high school diploma or college degree, people are unable to get high-paying jobs that could help them escape their poverty. But there's a paradox at play. While Makoko thrives on water, residents here lack access to safe drinking water. Most of Lagos has perhaps never been to Makoko, especially not when it rains. It had been pouring on and off on a recent Sunday there. The rain spilled sewage and solid waste through the streets, leaving behind a stench. Shops lining the flooded streets didn't seem bothered by their environment and continued selling a range of items, from fish to teddy bears. In 2016, daily demand for water in the state stood at 724 million gallons, while production was 317 million gallons, leaving a gap of 407 million gallons. Worse still, some of the water never reaches households due to constant fracturing of run-down pipes. While residents rely on informal sources of water, this costs them a lot of money. Only the affluent people of Lagos are able to afford having piped water in their homes. Makoko also lacks drainage and sanitation. Domestic sewage from the slums is let straight into the surroundings, increasing the risk of infectious diseases among inhabitants. Only last week, there was an outbreak of cholera in the slums. Today, Makoko looks more like an orphan pawned off and then left to die by rich relatives. The Lagos state government considered the settlement a needless blight on its megacity drive. There have been several interventions by different non-profit organizations to better the way Makoko residents live, but it still feels like an objection. Some of the interventions, a couple of residents said, have not been beneficial to the community. Instead, they line the pockets of the initiators of such interventions. In July 2012, more than 200 people were made homeless due to the government issuing a demolition exercise of the Makoko waterfront communities. A 72-hour quit notice was delivered to the residents, and it stated that due to the environmental nuisance, security risk, impediment to economic and gainful utilization of the waterfront, people who own the shanties should vacate the area. Police and state government staff arrived using machetes to cut down the stilts of the wooden homes on water. At that time, no alternative accommodation was offered to the residents. The demolition was halted on July 21, 2012, after 5 days, in which a community leader was shot by a police officer. With only a 72-hour notice, some of the displaced residents were taken in by their neighbors. Some lived with their possessions and their children in their canoes, and others rebuilt in the allocated boundary of 100 meters from the electricity cables. Being a health and an environmental hazard, as well as being out of line with the Lagos state's development plans, encouraged the state to undergo the demolition exercise on the water settlements. Furthermore, the residents were understood to be in danger because of the electricity cables that run along the shanties on the water, rising water levels, thunderstorms, and heavy rainfall. The environment is also seen to be degrading, due to waste being dumped into the lagoon and the haphazardness of the settlement. Lagos state government also believes that Makoko is an impediment to the economic and gainful utilization of the waterfront, and it undermines the megacity status that Lagos is trying to achieve. Initially, the state government hinted towards developing the area and relocating those who live on land, but refused to relocate the illegal residents on water. In August 2012, the state government offered Agboa, Ikorodu, northeast of Lagos, as a relocation option for those displaced during the clearance exercise. However, the community rejected this because, due to their trade, they need to be close to water. They explained during negotiations that living on the water is natural to them and it allows them to work. They also stated that Makoko is important to the economy of Lagos because the fish they catch is what feeds the whole state. The living conditions in Makoko have also put Gen Z at risk of physical danger. The shacks and houses in the floating slum are often overcrowded and poorly constructed, making them vulnerable to collapse during storms or floods caused by the constant change in weather patterns. The situation in Makoko slum is a clear example of the consequences of inequality and poverty. The young have been denied the basic rights and opportunities that are essential for their development and prospects. The Nigerian government has ignored the residents for years, leaving them to live in poor conditions. Despite its history of resilience and survival, the future of Makoko remains uncertain as the community continues to struggle. Nevertheless, we hope the community gets the support it needs to combat the situation at hand. In 2013, a Nigerian architect, Kunle Adeyemi of NLE, proposed to transform the water slum status of the Makoko waterfront community to a floating island by creating a functional building prototype. This prototype would have the ability to combat previous issues with flooding on land by having the school float alongside the community. The Makoko Floating School comprised alternative sustainable buildings and structures designed to adapt to the resident community's aquatic lifestyle. The floating school utilized local materials such as bamboo, timber, and resources to produce architecture that applied to the physical, social needs of people and reflects the culture of the community. Wood was the major material for the structure, support, and finishing of school building. The form of the school building was a triangular A-frame section with about 1,000 square foot play area. The classrooms are located on the second tier and are partially enclosed with adjustable louvered slats. The classrooms are also surrounded by spatial public greenery. There is a playground below the classroom while the roof contains an additional open-air classroom. The classroom spaces can be used for communal functions, especially during out-of-school hours. Sustainable features include application of solar cells to the roof, rainwater catchment systems, and composting toilets. The structure is also designed to use about 250 plastic barrels to float on the waters and be naturally ventilated and aerated. There are considerations to use the building prototype to provide additional infrastructure for the community, including an entertainment center, a community hub, and health clinics. The project brings optimism to those dealing with everyday problems in Makoko.